It's been a hot minute since a traditional 3D Mario title, and man am I excited for Super Mario Odyssey. In leading up to Odyssey, I've been running a marathon of every main series 3D Mario platformer on my Twitch channel, and it's been a pretty fun way to revisit the series as a whole. I've never played all these games immediately back to back before, but I feel like now is the best time I'll ever have of these games completely fresh in my head to review. While there are technically 6 3D Mario platformers out there, I'm going to focus on the original 3 today. Galaxy 2 is in many ways a direct extension of the first Galaxy, and we'll mention it from time to time. And while 3D Land and World literally have the word 3D in their title, their timer and point-based level style always felt more to me like a sequel to the traditional 2D Mario games rather than the first 3 Mario platformers. There's a lot to be said about Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Galaxy, and the format I'll be using today will be going through 8 different categories for each game, right here. Unlike most videos like this, I'm not going to be awarding any pure winners for each category because I think comparing and reviewing these games is a little more complicated than that, but I will go through the strengths and weaknesses of each game for each category. At the end, I'll let you guys know my personal favorite of these 3, but I'm hoping today will be a fun, critical journey through the highs and lows of Mario's first decade of 3D platforming. Let's jump in! A lot of this section is going to be an introductory explanation if you haven't played one of these games, so if you want to skip right to the criticism, you can jump right to this timestamp. Super Mario 64 is the grandfather of today's list, and while it is the predecessor for 3D Mario games, it's also the predecessor for 3D platforming in general. While it is predated by some older 3D platforming titles, such as Jumping Flash on the PlayStation, Mario 64 is one of the first 3D games to take advantage of an analog stick for free movement and multiple camera options to see the world around you. Somehow, despite being released extremely early into 3D console gaming's lifespan, Mario 64 remains one of the best games of its genre. Its main mechanic of separate missions to retrieve collectibles, in this case 120 Power Stars, would lay the ground rules for these first 3 Mario games. Your main hub world is the castle itself, connecting you to levels through magic paintings that transport you to vastly different worlds. While it is a little generic, the castle layout is simple enough to follow as you unlock additional stages on higher and lower floors, while still leaving some room for you to take a different turn and end up stumbling across a new secret or two, like an entire level hidden inside of a ghost in the courtyard, or draining a moat to find a mini-level outside the castle walls. It isn't flashy, but it's easy to jump into any level that you want to at any given time, and it sets the stage for 3D Mario games to come. Super Mario Sunshine took the foundation of Mario 64 and ran it in several unexpected directions. For better and for worse, I think it's the most experimental 3D Mario game, trying a lot of different things that we haven't really seen since. Set in the tropical Isle Delfino, Sunshine's adventure is a vacation gone wrong away from home, swapping the wide variety of worlds from 64 with a consistent tropical theme. Sunshine brought new storytelling techniques that we haven't really seen in Mario since, most notably an actual narrative and fully voiced cutscenes throughout. These voiced lines are extremely cheesy, and it seems to divide fans into 2 groups. Either you love the campy Saturday morning cartoon feel of Mario's talkin' pals, or you hate the chatter and wish that Mario dialogue was kept to the briefer text-based format. Sunshine also opened an unexpected door with Flood, an equipable water gun that serves as both a means of attacking and a movement ability. While it does have its own swappable power-up forms, Flood is a permanent addition to this game, making Sunshine a game built entirely around this new mechanic, with messes to clean up and jumps to take into consideration with your new jetpack power. The hub world of Delfino Plaza is huge with plenty to do, full of markets, buildings, boats, and an underground tunnel system. While not all of its secrets are necessarily fun, this is a really fun town to mess around in. Most of these levels are easy to reach, although it is annoying that you're forced to collect a power-up every single time you want to visit Pianta Village, all the way up here. Despite the massive hub world size though, Sunshine only contains half the number of main worlds as 64, with 7 compared to 64's 15. Super Mario Galaxy brings Mario to the stars. Not these ones, but the literal cosmic setting of outer space. This is the first 3D Mario game that cuts back on huge explorable areas in favor of 40+ mini-worlds, some of them revisited, but others used for just one major mission. While elements of outer space are prevalent throughout the adventure, this game is most similar to Mario 64 with its wide variety of individual level themes. Galaxy returns to a traditional-looking Mario with nothing equipped, but it builds some unique mechanics for the motion-based Wiimote controller, including a new spin attack and a pointer system for collecting and firing the new Starbit currency. Your hub here is the Comet Observatory, run by the new Princess Rosalina. This is also similar to Peach's Castle in Mario 64, where separate branching areas bundle sets of levels together. Besides a few bonus areas, the observatory focuses almost entirely on levels. Galaxy 2 takes this one step even further, cutting the hub world almost entirely in favor of a level select screen that you use most of the time. The Galaxy games are definitely the odd one of today's bunch. They contain the same style of gameplay and star missions as the first two 3D Mario games, but they definitely began a trend toward more levels and less exploration, and we'll talk about that throughout the day. In general, that's what all these three games bring to the table, but now let's see how they execute it. Mario 64 opened a massive can of worms that blew me away when I first played it in 1996. Before this, Mario had like 3 moves: jump, run, maybe a spin jump, and that's about it. 64 opened a toy box full of crazy maneuvers, including running, crawling, punching, kicking, and flipping all over the place. Despite the game's obvious visual age, I found that Mario still feels fun to control in 64. You have a lot of freedom for movement options from your jumps alone, from long jumps to triple jumps, to the small amount of momentum changing that you can do when you do that mid-air kick. It's a fun puzzle to master what each of these moves do for Mario and how they can move you through the air. Mario's land speed also feels like a great medium. It's not too fast, not too slow, but he does accelerate pretty quickly. Unfortunately, being the first major game of its kind on hardware 20 years old does occasionally come with some shoddy programming. Sometimes you're sure you're gonna grab a ledge, but instead you're rudely bounced off. Or sometimes Mario can't seem to decide if he's gonna fall to his death or stand on the platform that you just jumped to, sticking you in this uncomfortable purgatory where you're not sure if you're gonna fall or not. Sometimes you get knocked back by what appears to be an invisible wall. While Mario handles extremely well for what I'd say is around 99% of the time, it's that 1% that can truly ruin your day. Super Mario Sunshine feels like 64 on steroids. Mario is fast. He sprints instantly with a very quick change of direction, and he has tons of ways to launch you high up into the air, such as the brand new rotation-based spin jump. While Mario still has a dive that launches him through the air, he does lose the ability to long jump for horizontal distance, which I did find myself missing a little bit. He also can't punch or kick anymore, instead replacing that with the new Flood system, spraying water and an over-the-shoulder shooting system that aims well and can change your shooting strength with how hard you're pressing the R trigger. Flood's hover nozzle, your default secondary mode, starts a new era of Mario platforming that I call course correction. It feels really bad when you line up a jump and you just barely miss it. The hover nozzle can save you from bad times like these with an occasional safety net. Every once in a while, Mario will act in a weird way where I feel like I don't have as much control over his horizontal momentum when hovering, but it's mostly a clean experience. While there are some other issues that we'll talk about later, I find that Sunshine has a fairly clean set of movement options that make a Mario that is very fast and fun to control. Mario Galaxy is similar. After a decade of programming polish, Galaxy's Super Mario feels very responsive and easy to keep track of without many glitchy surprises. This Mario feels like the slowest of the three, but I suspect that that's likely because the levels he travels through are so much smaller than the other two games. The long jump is back too, which I've always enjoyed. Mario Galaxy released for the Wii, which means that it had to be connected to motion controls in some way. Your traditional attack and course correction jump come packed 2 in 1 with the game's new spin jump move. With a shake of the Wiimote, Mario will twirl, hitting enemies immediately next to you or propelling you slightly higher into the air. Like the hover nozzle, the spin jump has saved me from hundreds of missed jumps, making it a strong tool, but occasionally easy to use as a crutch. Shaking the spin jump usually works, but again, I'd say something like 99 out of 100 times. The 100th time when it does fail, it'll have you screaming and wishing that this move was just mapped to a button instead of the stupid shake controls. There's also the traditional point-and-click Wiimote controls, usually used to collect and fire star bits, but occasionally used for latching onto pole stars or catapulting Mario with different mechanics. It can take some time to get used to moving Mario with one hand while using the other hand to farm for star bits, but you will get used to it. Despite how annoying it is to actually set up the Wii motion sensor bar in 2017, I found that most of this stuff works just fine, but it did hurt my wrist after hours of pointing at the TV instead of holding them in a usual relaxed position. Galaxy is also loaded with a variety of motion-specific minigames, including balancing on a ball, blowing Mario in a bubble, or controlling gliding with this bird. My experience probably varies from most, but I found that many of the motion-controlled levels were a lot of fun and easy to maneuver. My personal favorite was the monkey ball style star rolling stages, but I didn't like the wave-covered manta ray racing very much. All in all, Galaxy is technically sound, with some minor motion-based growing pains along the way. Even the best controlled game can suffer if you can't reliably see where you're going, so next up we're going to look at the camera for each of these 3 games. As usual, Mario 64 is one of the first games of its kind to deliver a feature, this time being free camera control in a third-person game. Thematically, I think it's kind of wonderful that they explain the in-game camera as a physical lakitu that follows you and records your adventure. It's a fun idea, made even more hilarious when you see him in the mirror later in your game. In practice, it's good, but far from perfect. By default, the game presents you with a variety of preset angles, most of them workable. But if you desire to change your approach, the left and right C buttons rotate the action. Because these are buttons and not a dedicated right stick like we're used to in the modern era of console gaming, each press gives you a set rotation of the world around you. Sometimes it's too much, sometimes it's too little. Sometimes Lakitu just seems to tell you, hey, I can't turn anymore. You also have the ability to press R and change camera modes to always follow the direction Mario is facing. I never used Mario mode when growing up, so going through this playthrough was one of the first times I ever used it regularly. While it's definitely disorienting when used regularly, it does make some things like crossing a narrow bridge feel a lot more natural, and it alleviated some problem spots that I've had for the last 20 years before trying this mode. You can also sit and look at the world in first person at any time, which does show off how ugly 1996 polygonal graphics are, but is also nice to have as long as you're in an area with no enemies nearby. It definitely takes time to get used to and some intimate knowledge of the game's levels in order to deal with the camera. Ultimately, I would say that it's Mario 64's greatest weakness, and probably its most common complaint for new players. Sunshine takes things in the near opposite direction. Your C buttons become the small yellow C stick on the GameCube controller, and this gives you a near-complete 360-degree control over the game's camera, while also letting you zoom in and out. Lining up a specific camera angle can suddenly make a tricky balancing act into something that you can just hold up and walk past. It's a welcome addition. The game also uses a silhouette system to tell you where Mario is if for some reason your camera puts him out of direct line of sight, which is helpful but can become a huge hindrance in close areas where it feels like you can only view Mario from obscure silhouette angles. While you have a lot more control over the camera in wide open areas, I feel like Sunshine gives you some pretty bad default camera angles, especially in areas like the hotel. Rotating around pillars or other close objects can be a bit of a problem as well. I think it's a shade stronger than Mario 64's experiment, but Sunshine still suffers from rough patches at times. Meanwhile, Galaxy gives you the least active control of the camera, opting for mostly fixed angles for the occasional situation where you can bump the view around at the D-pad. Surprisingly, I found that Galaxy was the game I had the least camera issues with, but it makes sense when you consider the individual levels. Because they are smaller, there's fewer places to get lost and fewer reasons where you need a specific angle to progress forward. I think the designers knew how frustrating 3D cameras could be and opted to use Galaxy and Galaxy 2 as a way to remove this obstacle from the player entirely. Once again, however, this still isn't perfect. Because of the fixed angles, there's definitely been a time or two where I fell to my death on a jump that I was sure was correct. Wait, what? How did I miss that? It felt perfect! Sometimes when you can't control your viewing angle, some jumps can look or feel better than they actually are. That said, I think Galaxy probably had to do things this way. I feel like balancing the star bit wand, Mario's movement, and a camera at all times would have been overkill. Our next stop is level design, arguably the most important topic of the day. Super Mario 64 throws a ton on the table right from the beginning, with 15 main stages and tons of bonus areas scattered around the castle like the famous slide. Here's where the classic 3D Mario formula is established, where a large bulk of your collectibles, in this game's stars, are discovered through procedural missions. The first level typically takes you on a tour through most of the stage, leading to a peak or a boss at an endpoint, with everything else as exploratory points everywhere in between that you visit later. One big distinguishing feature of 64 though is that stars can be found out of sequence. If you happen to collect the 100 coin star before star number 5, then you can grab it. It's yours. Some levels do require a specific star to load a boss or an object, but in general you're free to explore each level to grab stars as you see them and discover them. A majority of the stars feel satisfying and quick to complete, letting you jump from challenge to challenge without a ton of waiting. There's also a lot of variety in this game, from the iconic Bob-omb battlefield to a desert pyramid combo level to a sunken ship to a floating ship. There's some really inventive stuff in here too. One of my personal favorites is Tiny Huge Island, where you freely hit pipes that allow you to traverse the same level as either a Godzilla tier or Ant tier character. Big Boo's Haunt is another one of my favorites, full of all kinds of disconnected mysteries and secrets that give it a wonderfully spooky vibe. I also enjoy the pure platforming of the game's 3 Bowser levels, which are a blast to revisit. Not every level is a winner though. Dire Docks is an incredibly bland second water level that feels unusually small with nothing fun to explore and some really short and lazy stars. It's just swimming without any of the intrigue or mystery of Jolly Roger Bay. Lethal Lava Land's disconnected islands sort of look like they were just plopped into a square without a ton of thought. And Rainbow Ride can feel exhausting with its on-rails carpets that can't be skipped or sped up in any natural ways. But overall, I really enjoy Mario 64's stages, and I think many of them hold up to the test of time pretty well. There's a lot of places to visit, and a lot of different ways to collect stars, and it keeps my attention well. Super Mario Sunshine is a really weird game to revisit. It definitely has a lot of variety in terms of individual missions, but its overall selection of worlds is small at just 7 total. Some of these stages are massive, but the game's episode system usually dictates which area of the level that you need to go to. Some of my favorite Sunshine levels have you climbing or exploring large areas with your newfound Flood jetpack, highlighting Mario's great mobility and movement options. I like the freedom that you have to move around and create your own shortcuts in open stages like Rico Harbor. I'm also a big fan of the game's pure platforming secret areas, which remove FLUDD and force you to run and jump the old-fashioned way. These are a ton of fun and offer a lot of fair challenge. Speaking of challenge though, Sunshine is by far the Mario game with the most jank I've ever played. I like a good intentionally difficult game, but a lot of Sunshine's infamous challenge seems to come from poor programming and design. Everyone knows the meme levels, the pachinko machine where you can't control FLUDD at all for some reason, the watermelon level where you so much as look at the watermelon in the wrong way and it explodes, relying on the Chuckster NPC to throw you in the right direction where if you're 1 degree wrong you're sent flying, the insanely finicky and disappointing final level where your boat has no control, the list goes on and on. I even found myself unintentionally breaking other levels, like this one in Pianta Village, where you're supposed to drag a chain chomp into a bath. I pulled the chomp in, but for some reason was sucked back toward it right before the cutscene that unlocks your shine. And it instantly killed me. Weird, unexpected stuff plagued me throughout the entire playthrough, and it's a shame. My last complaint with Sunshine is that it can feel repetitive. 24 of the game's shines are simple red coin collection missions, with some stages having as many as 3 separate red coin levels in them. This is just one more than Mario 64, which has 23 red coin levels, but it feels exhausting because it's spread over half of the level count. Each level also has a throwaway shine where you chase and spray down Shadow Mario. There's a lot of filler in here. Like I mentioned, there is a lot of good stuff to be found, but sometimes you gotta dig through the broken or boring stuff to get there, and you can't do missions out of order for the most part. Super Mario Galaxy is like those fill-it-yourself bags at the mall candy shop. It's full of all kinds of stuff. Some things you never tried before, some old favorites, sweet, sour, spicy, whatever. There's tons of variety, almost a comical amount. But because the concepts are spread thin, it's a double-edged blade. When you don't like a level, for me I didn't like this slingshot one, it's over quickly and you only have to revisit it 1 or 2 times. But when a level has an amazing concept, like the power-up blending freeze-frame Galaxy, or to go with our candy analogy, the sweets cover Toy Time Galaxy, they can leave you wanting more. In general though, I think the Galaxy games have some of the best designed pure platforming levels. I've heard this game described as, what if they took the floodless sections of Mario Sunshine and made an entire game out of it? And that's pretty dang accurate. Koichi Hayashida became the level director of Galaxy and overall director of Galaxy 2, and his work is immediately apparent. He likes crafting levels like a story or poem, with an introduction to a mechanic, a twist, and a finale that tests what you've learned over the whole level with its mechanic. It works, and it works well. Heck, even the underwater levels are fast and fun to explore. But there isn't a lot of room for exploring in these tiny, perfectly cut mechanic simulators. Most levels have you jumping from one small segment to the next, rotating around sphere-like surfaces using the game's entertaining but not realistic whatsoever gravity mechanics. Mario Galaxy is the most linear 3D Mario to date, and that doesn't make it bad, but it definitely gives it a very different feel from the first 2 games in the series. Even the most poorly designed Mario 64 or Sunshine levels are big enough to goof off in, but Galaxy doesn't leave you much room for sandbox-style fun. Whether or not that's important to you is going to depend entirely on what you like the most in video games. While special abilities aren't needed to make a fun Mario game, they become a staple of the series, and it's always fun to see what gimmicks they throw to make Mario games mix up your classic running and jumping. Mario 64 is admittedly pretty dry when it comes to this category. There are only 3 main power-ups in the game, the flying, metal, and vanish caps, and 2 of those 3 are just kinda jackets that you wear to unlock areas without really changing what you do in your gameplay. The flying cap is definitely the most dynamic out of the three, offering flight out of a cannon or triple jump that controls pretty closely to how I feel the cape from Super Mario World would if it was in 3D, complete with swinging up and down to maintain your speed and height. Unfortunately, the stages that use the flying cap the most, like the flying cap stage itself and the secret stage upstairs, use the flying cap in a very specific red coin collecting way, which is a bit of a chore. Arguably the best special ability is surfing over the water and lava with the Koopa Shell, which is incredibly fast and reckless. Also, did you know that you can actually grab the underwater shells and use them just like in Galaxy? It's been 20 years and I just recently learned that you can do this. It blew my mind. Super Mario Sunshine's power-up system was woven right into the game with FLUDD, immediately integrating new moves into your gameplay. We've talked about the regular spray and hover nozzles, but let's take a look at the other two. The rocket nozzle launches you high into the air and is honestly thrilling to use. It takes you an absurd distance up, letting you survey an area around you briefly or create shortcuts that were previously impossible before. The turbo nozzle lets you run really fast, so fast that you can even go over water. There are shockingly few times that you actually use this nozzle, unfortunately, and it's a bit of a bummer. Even times where you think it would be used, like racing over the water, are instead passed over to these blooper things. Another annoying thing about these nozzles is the way that they're unlocked. You unlock the use of these nozzles during story sequences with Shadow Mario, but you can't use every box right away. Each level has a main box that you have to discover and open first before the transparent boxes become solid. It's super strange having to unlock your boxes after you've already unlocked your boxes. Sunshine also introduces a playable Yoshi into the 3D Mario mix, allowing you to eat enemies, flutter jump ludicrously high, and vomit in order to turn your enemies into blocks. He also disintegrates into water for some reason, which is infuriating and random. There are only a few levels and secrets that require Yoshi, but the insane spin jump that you can pull off with it is hilarious. Plus, the extra percussion that gets added to your music every time that you ride is an adorable returning touch. Super Mario Galaxy's approach to power-ups is pretty similar to its game design as a whole. There are a lot of different power-ups and ability changers, but each only has a few brief uses. Speaking of brief, many power-ups are even timed, disappearing after a short while as if they were the classic star. Seeing an all-time classic like the Fire Flower being put on a clock definitely surprised me at first. A lot of Galaxy 1's power-ups are fairly safe. The bee lets you float a little, the boo lets you float a little and become a ghost. The red star lets you float a little. Okay, it lets you fly, but it's for like one level. The spring is one of my all-time least favorites, offering some unwieldy regular movement and a high jump timing that's just slightly different than the usual double and triple jump that you've been using for the rest of the game. The ice flower though is incredible, and skating or ice wall jumping is a super clever idea that works really well. Most of my favorite power-ups actually come from Galaxy 2, like the rock and the cloud. Not only does Yoshi make a return with the ability to freely spit back objects this time around, but he also gets power-ups too. The Dash Pepper is a personal favorite of mine, showing off the true potential of a speed-up power-up that I felt was underused in Sunshine. Just like the rest of Galaxy, there's a lot of variety, but you won't be using many of these mechanics for more than just 1 or 2 levels. Now, if there's one place where fans seem to agree, it's that all 3 of these games have incredible music. Nintendo legend Koji Kondo had a role in the music for all 3 games, lending to some of the most memorable themes of any 3D game. Mario 64 has some particularly catchy memorable themes, ranging from the booming Bob-omb Battlefield to the frantic slider theme, to my personal favorite, the soothing, lullaby-like quality the theme that you hear in the water stages. My only knock against 64's soundtrack is that it doesn't quite have the same level of variety as the rest of the game. That classic song we call Bob-omb Battlefield song? It's actually the theme for Bob-omb Battlefield, Whomp's Fortress, Tall Tall Mountain, and Tiny Huge Island. Almost every level in the game shares its theme with something else. Super Mario Sunshine, while having significantly less levels and scenarios than 64, does manage to get some personality to each level with a unique theme. Koji Kondo composed about half the themes alongside Shinobu Nagata, creating a mix that's relaxing and fun, perfect for a tropical vacation. Because everything on Isle Delfino is a tropical resort, the game's themes do blend together a little bit in my head, but like most Mario games, it's an absolute joy to listen to. One of my favorite bits is the electric guitar riff of the classic Mario theme when Shadow Mario first shows up. It's a nice touch. Super Mario Galaxy soundtrack is in a league of its own. Koji Kondo only composed a tiny bit for this game, although his main work, the Rosalina Observatory theme, is a wonderful piece that gets more instruments and impact the deeper that you progress into the game. The big name to thank for Galaxy's music is actually newcomer Mahito Yokota, who composed almost everything else. Galaxy delivers constant, powerful, and emotional pieces backed by the game's use of a 50-piece orchestra. There's a wonderful Iwata Asks entirely about the music just for this game, and I think it's definitely worth reading. Yokota went through an agonizing and depressing process of living up to Koji Kondo's legacy, and Kondo even denied some of his first submissions. A turning point for him was a quote from Kondo. "If somewhere in your mind you have an image that Mario is cute, please get rid of it. Mario is cool." There's a lot I could say about Galaxy's soundtrack, but yeah, it's freaking cool. The crown jewel of the experience is, in my opinion, Gusty Garden Galaxy, but there's a lot to love from top to bottom. I listen to the soundtrack of all three of these games often, and they've done an awesome job keeping the music exciting and unique over the years. What's a Mario game without a big Bowser and some big baddies to go with him? Super Mario 64 is notably light on bosses, and the ones that are out there are fairly simple. "Punch me to win," says iRock and Big Boo. "Jump on me to win," says Wiggler and Big Bully. Some of the best bosses in the game come right at the beginning. The Womp King, while simple, has a fun premise of hit and run that keeps him as one of the game's most memorable bosses. And King Bum-Bum's sneak up and throw mechanic serves as a great tutorial to train you for the big fight with Bowser himself. The 64 Bowser boss battles were iconic at the time for their use of analog stick swinging, but Battle 1 and 2 are over in just a single throw. The 3-throw final fight adds a little spice with a collapsing platform and more attacks, but the ability to immediately re-grab Bowser eliminates a ton of the challenge that I think the designers originally intended. Sunshine adds a handful of positive experiences to Mario's boss collection, including a simple but epic fight on top of a roller coaster versus a Mecha Bowser, a few forms of Petey Piranha, and the spice-hating, lotto-wielding King Boo. Someone is gonna have to explain to me why this game loved Gooper Blooper so much though, because you fight this thing for 3 separate shines and it's barely different between each fight. Also, if you can even call it a boss, brushing teeth underwater was pretty dang miserable. The final Bowser represents a bit of missed potential in my opinion. He requires you to use the rocket nozzle to slam 5 platforms and call it a day, and that's about it. It got me thinking about how I would have liked to see more bosses use your unique nozzle power-ups, and how I think it would have been especially epic if Bowser required you to use all 4 in one fight. But dreams aside, I think Sunshine has a decent mix. Galaxy also adds some incredible bosses, like the ping-pong battles of King Caliente, or the sneak-up-from-behind Dino Piranha variations. My favorite non-final boss in all of Mario games is Bouldergeist, an epic duel that involves you swinging and throwing bomb-boos into the center body, all while avoiding emerging pillars and the hands that can block your attacks. It's a thrilling adventure that I loved re-challenging for my recent playthrough. There are a few forgettable duds along the way, like the many airship bosses in Galaxy, but I've especially enjoyed Galaxy 1's Bowser battle. His final form is a great recap of the various skills that you've learned and the enemies that you've already faced, complete with an epic choir that chants as Bowser becomes vulnerable for damage. Galaxy 2 adds some solid fights of its own, but its ground pound meteorite Bowser feels way more disappointing than Galaxy 1, which is a shame. I've always craved bigger and more involved Mario boss fights, and I'm hoping that Super Mario Odyssey can deliver here. And moving on to the endgame here is secrets and completion. This is where I believe Super Mario 64 truly shines. Mario 64 is full of some crazy little details that you could easily skip over, making it a really fun game to replay over the years. There's a ton of hidden warp points, enemies that can steal your hat, or weird tricks like the underwater shell thing that I was just talking about earlier. The numerous large levels are primed for goofing off and discovering little tricks or quirks or shortcuts. This is also one of the most reasonable Mario games to 100% complete. Easily completable in a day or two if you're familiar with the general layout. Normally people prefer longer games to shorter ones, but I really feel like Super Mario 64 doesn't waste your time. It's packed full of interesting and varying star missions, and even the more tedious task of 100 coin stars at least let you remain in the level to finish an additional star if you like as well. The 120 star Easter eggs, like Yoshi on the roof or the incredibly fat endgame penguin race, are all pretty cute too. If there's one thing that I'll knock Mario 64 secrets for, it's accessibility. I think some of its logic is a little too obscure at times, like knowing that you need to fire your cannon at the corner of this wall to get a star, or tracking down secret coins all the way at the top of the pyramid that look exactly like regular coins. I'd be curious to see how someone who has never played these games before would fare without ever taking a trip to the internet for advice. Super Mario Sunshine has the same large, explorable format as Mario 64, and the hub world is a blast to explore for secret shines, but your main reason to go off course in this game is to fulfill your endgame condition. Collecting all the shines, which requires collecting 240 blue coins, which are sold to create 24 of the game's 120 main collectibles. Blue coins are fun to find incidentally, but they are miserable to complete. Like 64, some of them are tucked away in areas or spots that I feel are too obscure to find without some kind of external aid or guide. Many of them require you to spray completely random places with water, and unless you plan to cover every square foot of this game with FLUDD, you'll want a guide to track these down. Also painful is that many blue coins are exclusive to episodes, not just levels. Just look at this Mario Wiki for Serena Beach blue coin locations. We've got some stuff in episode 5 only, episode 6 only, episode 7 and 8 only. There's no kind of completion marker telling you when you've got every coin in an episode either. So you could realistically spend hours looking for coins in levels that you've already gotten all the coins in without even knowing it. Mario Sunshine is a great game if you're just playing to complete levels that you enjoy and take on Bowser. But it is one of the roughest Mario games I've ever played when going for 100% completion, and it's all thanks to these little blue punks. We kind of went over this for Galaxy in the level design section, but Galaxy just doesn't really have secrets and it doesn't really have exploration. You might do an alternate challenge here or there for extra star bits or open up a branching path if you find a hungry Luma, but Galaxy's levels aren't really there to be dissected or lived in. They mostly exist with a single path and a single objective, and that changes the game's dynamic quite a bit. Instead of secrets or collectibles, Mario Galaxy's big twist are the new challenge comments, slightly altered versions of existing levels with new rules, such as beating a level under a certain time or beating a level without taking damage. I'll take these challenges over blue coins, but they are somewhat superficial. Even more ridiculous is 100% completion, which gates the final Galaxy 1 level behind beating every single level a second time as Luigi. No differences at all in the levels, just Luigi. Galaxy 2 mixes things up a little bit by adding 120 hidden green stars, all in slightly different places than their original location. These are mostly fun to collect, but do contain a few obscure spots that I don't think would be easy to find without jumping to suicide or consulting the internet for help. At the very least, these at least have an audio cue when you're near them to give you a little hint. Galaxy 2 also rewards completionists as well, locking one of the toughest levels in Mario history to the end of the journey. That's decent. Oh man, is that it? Wow, we did it! Those are my thoughts on the 3 major 3D Mario platformers. I don't know if I'll ever play them immediately consecutively like this again, but it's been fun looking at them in comparison to each other. They all have their strengths. 64 has lots of big levels and is packed with replay value. Sunshine is colorful and feels completely unique in tone and gameplay. And Galaxy hits hard with shorter but cleaner platforming and superior music. I absolutely adore all 3 of these games, but if I have to pick a favorite, I'm going with Super Mario 64. It's funny, I feel like I criticized 64 a lot during this review, but there's something intangible to strict criticism that made it really stand out to me. As Reggie would say,
the game is fun.
I had the most fun replaying Mario 64. I thought I'd be bored of it this time around, but it somehow felt better than ever, even directly compared to its sequels when playing through it all in a marathon. Is it nostalgia? I mean, partially. I was 6 years old when this game was first released, and it was the first Mario game I 100%ed on my own. It's a game that I know and a game that I understand. Yet every time I pick this game back up, it delivers something new. There's lots to see, enough movement options to keep it interesting, and enough content to feel fulfilling without overstaying its welcome. When I learned that I'd be able to meet Shigeru Miyamoto a few years ago, I knew that there was one thing I'd have to get signed. It's one of my favorite games that he's ever worked on, and to this date, my favorite 3D Mario game. Super Mario Odyssey sure looks like it's inspired by the early 3D Mario platformers, and I'm hoping it takes a little of everything from the games that we've talked about today. If you want to catch my stream of that game when it comes out, or catch any of the past games that I've done for this huge marathon already, I highly encourage you to check out my Twitch channel over at twitch.tv/thejwoods to join in on the action. While we were editing this video, I got a review copy for Super Mario Odyssey, and my review for the game will be dropping on October 26th. Tune in to see my thoughts on the newest Mario game. Thank you so much for watching this huge video, and I'll see you guys next time with more Nintendo content.